Good morning, Floor, and good morning to our listeners. Welcome to the Tipon Report here on KNDI 1270 AM radio. You're listening to us live here in the station in Honolulu, Hawaii, on a beautiful morning in Hawaii. I want to remind our listeners that you can listen to us here live in the studio every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. or you can catch us on YouTube, where we'll put up our show on our YouTube channel. Look for us on YouTube at Tipon Report. And as always, please send us your emails or your questions to tiponreport@gmail.com. Again, that's tiponreport@gmail.com. We're going to try and get to your questions, get to some of the issues that are addressing us here in Hawaii. We're going to hit a little bit of national news too. We're going to hit some local issues. That's what a lot of the listeners want to talk about here on the station. But now that we put our other broadcasts on YouTube, we're getting a little bit of traffic and some questions from some of our followers who watch the YouTube channel as well. But it's another, of course, gorgeous day in Hawaii. Well, it was a little gloomy. It was a little drizzly last night. It's a little gloomy coming in this morning. But hey, in Honolulu, Hawaii, how can you beat the weather? You can't beat, especially now that school's out, the traffic coming into the station, the traffic everywhere. The weather looks great in Hawaii. It's not too humid yet. I know that on the east coast of the United States, the weather is getting pretty hot and humid. But here in Hawaii, it's just another beautiful day to be here. And welcome, as always, I'm your host, Noel Tipon, along with my co-host, Attorney Emmanuel Tipon. Dad, beautiful day in Hawaii. Nice drive. Oh, you always have the short drive. You always have that quick short drive coming into the station.
Good morning, Noel. Pagkabigat yung po ng tingtingig to programa tayo. This is another beautiful Thursday, full of tourists in Waikiki. So we have to drive very carefully because they don't respect the traffic signals here. So they just jump into the road.
Are you talking about the pedestrians?
Pedestrians, the
yeah.
tourists without masks. I should complain because there's just too much of them. I've never seen too many. Up to 10 o'clock last night, this food trucks, there are two food trucks in my neighborhood, and they were full of tourists. 10 o'clock at night, I had already finished dinner. So, too many tourists. Sobra ng tourists. They have no place to go because Europe is closed, Philippines, too many restrictions. Japan and Korea, I think they have too many restrictions. So they come to Hawaii, and they have plenty of money because they were given the pandemic money, which some did not deserve. And that's unfortunate, but America is a rich country, and they're also good at printing paper bills. The paper money in the United States is no longer worthy. Soon we will have inflation, Noel.
I don't think it's soon. I think it's here. We have inflation. The price of everything is going up. I mean, the one that we feel the most, of course, is gas. Gas prices are skyrocketing. They're through the roof. I don't know if that is a direct result of inflation, but this artificial money that we're printing is certainly a direct cause of all of the prices going up. Groceries, I mean, that you'll see that there was an article in the news about grocery prices being excessively high here in Hawaii. But you're right. I think that's because we can artificially raise these prices or because it's certainly not demand. The demand hasn't gone up. It certainly has something to do with the ability of people to pay for these. The money that's being printed and the money that we have saved is worth less. Not worthless, it's just worth less than it used to be. So
I think it's worthless already. It's like the Japanese Mickey Mouse money during the war. You need a bag full of money to buy 1 kanta of rice. And the most significant change in Hawaii is the prices of homes. Did you see that dilapidated home in Kalihi selling for 1 million?
Yeah, why is that? I mean,
Oh my gosh, there's no garage. There's no road in front of it. It's just an alley. $1 million.
But you know, if
Ooh.
that's the price that they're asking, that means that someone they've got to be getting those prices somewhere. That has to be the case. You wouldn't list your house for something that is so far, because the real estate agents, they wouldn't list a house for something that is so outrageous that it's not even going to garner any interest. So that must mean that dilapidated house that was listed for $1 million, there's comparable houses in the neighborhood that are getting that price. Otherwise, why would you list it for that much?
Well, if that is 1 million, your house must be worth 5 million already.
Oh, I wish. If it was $5 million, I'd sell it.
Yeah, you sell it. I will be the broker.
Email me at tiponreport@gmail.com if you wanna. Don't give out my address. Now people are gonna be like, what's your address? Go find my address online.
No.
But you're right. I think inflation. It's certainly a buyer's market. I've heard that people who are listing their houses are getting multiple offers, cash offers on their houses, and a lot of it is because interest rates are low to get people to try and spend, and that is the kind of thing that should I'm not an economist, that should help the inflation, but the prices are just going up. The gas pumps are going up. Gas prices at the gas pumps are going up, and the problem with that is that when you artificially increase the price of something like gas, and whether it's artificial or not, it's the price of gas is increasing. It discourages people from doing things like traveling or going places, and that has a cause and effect, and people will just stop going places. I don't think that is necessarily encouraging people to take public transportation. The more people that take public transportation, the more buses they need, the more crowded it is, and buses don't run on they don't run on air. They don't run on seawater. They run on gas. They get charged the same prices, if not more. So the fact that the government of the United States of America is just arbitrarily printing money, and this leftist liberal agenda says, "Hey, look, we're going to print money to get out of the pandemic," is a ridiculous notion, because it keeps the American population dependent on the government. The more that you rely on the government, the more dependent you get on the government. And what does that lead to? That leads to people voting to the left, because the left is what's in favor of big government. I'll get off my soapbox. This is what we always turn into. We always turn into this. We're talking about how the left is ruining America, because it's absolutely true. When you rely on the government for everything, then you just become dependent on them, and then they control your lives, and you'll have no more independence. The big government does not support or doesn't encourage small business. Small business is what makes the ordinary person obtain that independence and that wealth. I don't care if you work for IBM, which is a private company, or you work for the federal government. If you are an employee, and we need employees, we absolutely do. We need employees. But if you are an employee, you are beholden to that employer. And it's not the employer that you report to every day. He's just middle management. It's the guy that really owns that company and owns the big house on the hill, or the big houses, the boats, the planes. You're beholden to those people. And there are some rich people out there who are altruistic and don't want to simply take advantage of the little guy, but that's how you get big. And so don't be fooled by the people like the Bill Gates who want to give their wealth away. How rich do you have to be comfortable giving away millions of dollars? And he didn't acquire that wealth by just simply, being an employee. He is an employer. He employed people, but the problem is he started small. All these people like your Apple and all these places, they start out in their mom's garage or
in the garage. They start in the garage.
But that, I'll tell you what, now that they're big business owners and they're high tech, and they don't want that competition. So they want to make sure that government is involved in every aspect of your life, and you're dependent on technology. Here we are with technology. I've got an iPhone and an iPad in front of me. to get the news. You've got a newspaper. You've got the old
got
school
a
newspaper.
newspaper,
You're reading the exact same thing I am, but you've got a paper in your hand, which is what I'm comfortable, but I can't. It's tough for me to scroll.
This is, I look at the obituary to be sure that I'm not reported as dead. Because somebody might report that Attorney Tipon is already dead. So I want to sue this newspaper just in case they do that. This paper is not really worth much. These newspapers are biased.
It's a liberal rag. All of them.
But this one, this headline today, which you should be interested in.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, but I'm glad you brought.
Grand jury declines to indict officer. So they shot a 16-year-old boy. You have a 16-year-old boy now.
I do.
He's not driving, and this boy was shot 10 times, I think, in the back. He was shot in the back. And the grand jury declines to indict them. Indict, INDICT, means to file charges against them. So, what's your take on that? There's another story here. Woman says police covered up assault. So, the police now in Hawaii are like those in the mainland. They are now using their power to kill or harm civilians. And I once wrote an article saying that we should defang, D-E-F-A-N-G, the police. Not defund, but defang. Remove their fang. You know the tiger has a fang. To tame the tiger, you remove the fang, and that's what they should do to the police. But the mayor has not selected the 7th member of his police commission. I think he's maybe looking for another white guy. 2 white guys were. I asked his chief of staff. Yesterday we had lunch at Max. His chief of staff is Sam Moko. But they wanted to meet with the Filipinos. I don't know why they want to meet with the Filipinos. The election is still far away.
Is the police commission? I thought the police commission was independent. They're appointed by the mayor?
They're appointed by the mayor or confirmed by the city council. The last one was a white police guy. They asked him, do you believe there is racism in Hawaii? And he said, no, there's no racism. Oh, so they attack him.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
There's no racism in Hawaii. I'm a victim of racism. That's why I have to wear a suit, so they get more respect. People ask, attorney, don't you feel warm wearing long sleeves and coat? I do, but if I don't, I will get no respect, unless I was a white guy. So I do this to get respect. I go to the bank, oh, they respect me, they don't ask for ID. Oh, I go to the store, they treat me nicely, but I have to sacrifice. And so the police who killed the boy, poor boy, 16-year-old, they say he stole a vehicle. Is that the reason to shoot him at the back?
Well, I mean, I think the story deserves a little bit of context. So and I'm not going to make excuses for the boy. I have a 16-year-old boy, and it breaks your heart. There's absolutely no reason for the police to shoot a 16-year-old boy in the back. I'm not going to make excuses for the boy. I'm not going to make excuses for the police.
But about the grand jury, I mean, they did not indict that. Why don't they let the court decide?
Well, the grand jury has it all depends on the way that the evidence was presented to the grand jury. And the problem with the grand jury is that it's done kind of in secret, and you don't get the transcripts of what happens in the grand jury or the recording of the grand jury until a court case is. I don't even think you can Freedom of Information Act that. I think that it's done in secret. You won't get the transcripts unless an indictment is handed down and it's turned over to you in discovery. But to give context to the story, the police were chasing a vehicle that they believed was used in several crimes, several robberies. The driver of the vehicle was this 16-year-old boy. And it's unclear, so these people who are making conclusions, they weren't there, you don't know. It's unclear whether or not the boy the 16-year-old boy was involved in any crimes other than driving this vehicle, if that was a crime in and of itself. And so, because they were chasing the vehicle that was involved in crimes, and he wasn't stopping, he wasn't pulling over, at a certain point, the police opened fire on the vehicle. So, in their estimation, they believed that it was justifiable to open fire on this vehicle in order to stop it. Whether or not the vehicle or the driver of the vehicle is trying to harm, kill any of these police officers, I question whether or not that was the wise thing to do. Now, when you're in the heat of the moment, look, I've never been. There was another incident in on the mainland where police actually were serving a warrant on a home where there was a known criminal, and the criminal was already in the vehicle, and he started driving off, and at one point he was aiming towards police officers. The police officers jumped out of the way, and then they continued to fire at the vehicle. And their justification was, well, yeah, they were acting in self-defense or to stop the vehicle from going. And I think the same logic was kind of applied here. But at the point where you are shooting into the back of the vehicle, that seems to indicate that there is no imminent danger. I mean, if the police officers are all shooting from behind, it seems like he's now running. Now, I don't like the fact that he's going to run and he is going to flee and he's going to get away. I don't like that fact. But to continue to fire into the back of a vehicle until he stops, that starts getting a little bit more questionable. It starts getting a little bit more, why did you have to do that if he was already fleeing or running away? Again, and here's the thing. The police will not release the video footage of what happened. And their excuse is that he is the victim of this shooting is a child. Now, that I don't understand why that's their policy, and if it is their policy, they can change it. I mean, they're the police. They can change. It's their policy. They can change their policy. All of the other police forces across America are releasing footage, including the one where there was that 16-year-old girl who was shot in the mainland. Release the footage, and then there won't be a question about it. If you believe that you did everything right, and it's a justified shooting, then release the footage. If you're not releasing the footage, then the only conclusion that we can come to is that you believe that there's something in there that would be incriminating. Otherwise, why not release the footage? So, for whatever this boy did, and the police may not have known that it was being driven by a boy, but whether it's a boy or a man or a woman or anybody, if they were committing a crime and they're trying to flee, that's one thing. But to continue to fire into the vehicle becomes suspect. So I'm not in favor of defunding the police. And you're to your point,
defang the police.
Well, if you defang them, then if a tiger. Okay, so to your analogy, a tiger without fangs is not a tiger. What is it? It's like
tiger.
It's a big cat. Then what good is it? What good are the police if they don't have the power to enforce the laws? Now, is shooting into the back of a vehicle while it's fleeing enforcing the laws? Apparently, they believe that it is. But you can come to your own conclusions. Here's the thing I know about Hawaii and the police. We'll never be the mainland. We'll never want to defund the police because at the heart of it all, and part of it is because Hawaii is so small. It's a very small community, and you live on an island. You don't just move or back and forth. And most of the people who live on this island are either related to or close friends with or know somebody who's a police officer. And so you're not going to take the job away from somebody. So we love our police here. We just do. No matter what they do, we love our police. I mean, heck, Chief K. Aloha stole money, and he is not vilified the way that some other, I mean, he knowingly, intentionally, and with malice aforethought did bad things, and he abused his power. He, and along with his wife, and they were indicted, and they were charged, and they were found guilty by a federal jury. We still don't vilify him and it doesn't really affect what happens to the police force, because they believe that it's just a one-off, and that's absolutely not true. But Hawaii loves their police officers. We'll never be the movement defund the police, no matter what they do, because they will always believe that there's only a few bad apples. They'll always believe that here, and I think that movement to defund the police, or even defang the police, or whatever you want to call it, is, I think that it then creates a situation where there's less law and order. I think that in the institution there will always be abuses because they have power, and just, but you have to, what you have to do is you have to get good leadership in there. You can't get political leadership. You can't just put in somebody there because you want to satisfy some sort of political agenda, or because of diversity, or because of whatever your ideology is. You have to start. It has to start with good leadership. And if the leader sets a good example and doesn't tolerate these types of things, and the police force is big, then you'll get a good police force. But if you don't, if you settle for a face rather than substance, then you're going to get these problems. So when it comes to this grand jury, the prosecutor, Stephen who is an elected official, if you don't like what he did, make him know it when you go to the voting booth next time.
Now, can they not just file a case without having to go through a grand jury? Why did they choose grand jury?
There are certain cases. So probably for the type of crimes that they wanted to indict him with, they have to go to a grand jury. You can't just information charge or complaint charge someone for murder or for a homicide. You have to go to a grand jury.
No, sex assault cases, they do.
Grand jury.
You need a grand jury.
Yeah.
Not. But this grand jury.
So blame the grand jury.
I've been in a grand jury. I've been an interpreter in a grand jury, and these grand jury people, they do not know the law. They are lay persons. So why should lay persons be in a grand jury when they do not know the law?
I think that because they're ultimately going to be the jurors. So I think it's the American justice system. You trust the uneducated as well as the educated. You want a cross section of society to be the people who hand down indictments. And what you hope. So the one of the points I wanted to make is that it also depends on the way that the prosecutor presented the case to the grand jury. So if the prosecutor went in there, because I've seen, there's the lawyer for the family of the child that was killed. He says in his 50 years of practice, he's never seen a grand jury fail to indict. That's not true. But it has a lot to do with the way that the grand jury has presented its evidence. And if the prosecutor goes in there with a lukewarm case, and he goes in there not being, or she goes in there without being committed to their case, believing in their case, then you face the significant possibility that the grand jury won't indict. And so I am suspicious. But it is true that it is very rare that the grand jury does not indict if the prosecutor goes in there with a strong case. So either the grand jury was biased and said, the police shooting was justified. Because here's the thing. The defense, no one shows the other side. There is absolutely no defense team that goes in there and argues exculpatory evidence, exonerating evidence. The only evidence that a grand jury gets is from the prosecutor's office. And the standard is, if you believe everything that the prosecuting attorney is telling you is true, and you have to assume that everything that they tell you is true, is their probable cause. So, what this tells me, based upon this, is either the grand jury, they thought to themselves, there's absolutely no way we're indicting police officers in a shooting where there was a crime involved and it wasn't just a random shooting. Or the prosecutor went in there with a very lukewarm presentation of the evidence. Because if you if you had the evidence to convince a lawyer or the prosecutor, because this isn't the first deputy making this decision to indict a police officer. This is the prosecutor. I know he's a figurehead, and there's a first deputy, but in this type of a high-profile case, Stephen Am is making the decision. If he's not, then he's plain wrong in that situation. So, if they went in there with a lukewarm case and they weren't forceful in their presentation, that could explain why the grand jury didn't indict.
There are a lot of possibilities, but George Floyd, the police who killed George Floyd, or alleged,
well, there's a video of George
would
Floyd.
not have been indicted if there was no public outcry. You need a public demonstration. Even if there was a video, the police would not have been charged if there was no public outcry. And I think that's what Hawaii needs, a public outcry. And there's another case here involving the police, in which a woman said the police covered up an assault. So the American Civil Liberties Union filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Honolulu police. So now the police does not have the money to pay, so the city and new taxpayers will have to pay again when there is a settlement. So the abuses of the police department apparently is costing money to the taxpayers. But what can you do? You are in Hawaii, it's run by the Democrats, and that's
you need to change the way you vote. All of these things,
Yeah.
all of these big money costing things, whether you're for the rail or against the rail. I like the idea of the rail. Living on the windward side, I will never ride the rail. Well, I won't say never ride the rail. I won't daily benefit from the rail, riding the rail. I do think that the rail is good in the sense that if it is done correctly, if it really goes where they say it will, and I mean, unfortunately, you got to throw money at these things. I mean, if you're willing to throw money at foolish things, why not throw money at something that is actually, that is actually going to help, right? I mean, you want to throw money into researching whether or not you should have a ferry, a super ferry, go from Oahu to the Big Island, but you won't throw money into public transportation like a rail, and then you say, oh, it's over budget, and it's an eyesore, and people don't like it. Well, I mean, that's called the future, ladies and gentlemen. And while I might not ride it on a daily basis, here's what it does help. For all you people, the people who live in town and they claim that they're never going to ride it, or people live on the windward side and say that they're never going to ride it, here's what happens. When you go into town and you look for parking, there will be more parking because people are riding the rail instead of driving their car. So the people who are probably against it are gas companies, right? People who run parking garages, they don't want the rail. People who are landowners and don't want to give up that land. It's no different than the people who were protesting the super ferry. They weren't environmentalists. They were rental car agencies. They were airlines who didn't want to give up their business. So this whole notion, but I think that everything is money driven and it's political, and whether or not there's this actual police abuse, I think that if you want to see a change, you got to change the way in which you vote. And if you keep electing the same people, and I'm not talking about the exact, I'm not talking about an individual person and kicking him out, like when they were fed up with who was that state senator that they were fed up with, and they voted him out. He wasn't reelected. It had nothing to do with him. All they did was put another guy who had the exact same agenda in his place. It just was a different person. Stop voting for Democrats. I mean, I'm sorry to all the overwhelming majority of the Democrats who are here in Hawaii.
Let's call them Democrats.
Well, there's a difference. There are Democrats,
There
and
are
then there
good Democrats.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know them.